is Mervyn Pilley of SW Bruce here? Is anybody going to...
Unfortunately, he has put a question in, but unfortunately he wasn't able to attend in the event.
Okay, okay.
The question perhaps could be...
Well, I will read the question out then. On behalf of Mervyn Pilley, does the panel believe that procurement processes will ever be streamlined down to focus on the critical issues as opposed to being a tick box exercise, often with a great deal of duplication? Now, who wants to start with that one? I sense Nick does. Nick, his corporate lawyer veins are coursing.
A solitary trail of public procurement with a client of mine who was involved in supplies into NHS trusts, and who was bumped off a preferred bidder list on a supply contract, and discovered that they were bumped off by another company, and further investigation of that company showed that they were under a CVA, company voluntary arrangement. So they were essentially insolvent. So the idea that somebody had ticked boxes in an NHS trust and failed to either read or have a box that said, "Are you solvent?" Just struck us remarkable. Now, luckily, we've got an expert in procurement contracts who, I should hasten to add, I've spoken to about this subject, who was able to correct that. But you'd think it would be an obvious correction, but it isn't. Because there is a discretionary criteria for any public authority to allow a business which is bankrupt through as a bidder. Bonkers, absolutely bonkers. But I would regard that as box ticking to its extreme. It has to be said that this government is determined, and has shown its determination to reduce the burden on business of procurement processes, both from the public authority point of view and from the bidder's point of view. They have been leading the way in the European Union in getting a new directive, which is should be in place in the UK next year, that will significantly reduce a number of key elements and should make it easier, particularly in the SME market, because the pressure is going to be to break packages of procurement and contracts into bite-sized chunks that are suitable either for SMEs to bid for in the first instance, or to join in the supply chain as approved subcontractors or suppliers. So it should make a difference. And in fact, there was a government conference this week to lay out the new rules that are going to apply, and it should make a difference. I'd also say, in terms of procurement, that it can appear cumbersome, it can appear extremely long-winded, a lot of duplication as has been pointed out. But they're all the rules are derived from EU law and WTO regulations. And they are there for a good reason. They are there to provide an even playing field and to allow smaller businesses and efficient businesses to come in and with an even playing field against perhaps an inefficient incumbent supplier or provider. So that the principle is right, but as you don't have to read the paper more than a weekly basis to know that government is very capable of getting it incredibly wrong on a wide number of occasions, both in terms of the award and in terms of the running of procurement contracts.
How can the principle of answering 500 questions taking 4 days and man-hours be right in procuring a lot of contracts for small businesses?
Because I don't think that's the principle. I think the principle is right, that you should allow a process where the bidding for public contracts is open and transparent. Where I would agree with you entirely is that the actual process, how you find out who is equivalent, who is capable of providing the contract, is entirely wrong at the moment. It is far too complex, and it's going to be a deterrent to SMEs that don't have the resource to put 5 people filling in forms and providing historical information from 10 years before that's not actually relevant to the contract that's being bid for. The other point I'd make in this context is that a lot of public authorities and increasingly private entities, the more substantial private entities, are using procurement companies, outsourcing the whole thing, so the whole thing is taken one step removed. And I think that's an even greater deterrent, because you've got people who are looking at the 500-page form who have no connection, no knowledge of the contract, the bidder, the incumbent, or even their own client. They're just there to tick boxes. And I think that's an appalling development. It's one that I've seen my clients suffer from. And the deterrent from SMEs is you think, A, I won't stand a chance. It's probably be predetermined. The incumbent will get the job, will put in hours and hours of work, days and days of resource, go to several meetings and be told, no, you didn't make them up.
Stephen, do you have any view on this?
Yeah, a couple of things I would say on that, I guess. Starting with the public procurement side, there is something that hopefully many of you are familiar with called the Social Value Act that has been put in place in the last year or so in this country. And it's designed as part of public sector services procurement to say, what additional value do you add to the wider communities in which you're going to be delivering these services over and above the price and the particular terms that you may have? So, for example, if you've got programs working with young apprentices or skills development with at-risk teenagers or whatever it may be, how do you kind of show the values of your business and why should someone pay attention to that? And I think it's new, so we'll see where it goes. It could become quite a powerful tool for small businesses to differentiate themselves in what is an otherwise complex environment. The other thing I would say, and this is dealing from the business's point of view, in my day job, I'm chief executive of something called Business in the Community. We're a membership organization of most of the bigger businesses in the country, and we've been thinking pretty hard about how level is the playing field for smaller businesses to get into the supply chains of those big companies. And we've given this quite a bit of thought and study. We've got a number of leading businesses working with us on this. And what we've discovered, not surprisingly to the people in this room, is that as a result of the centralization, the sophistication, the professionalization, whatever word you want to use, of procurement, just like HR, just like other things, the flexibility of branch managers, store managers, others to use their tools to work with small businesses has been limited. So we've been thinking a little bit about how do we unlock those supply chains. Now, not to give an advantage to SMEs, but to make sure they're on a level playing field. And some of it is the complexity of the application process. Who's got the time to invest that much into it if you don't think you're going to win? And all the rest of it. And we had an event this morning, which was quite fun. We had and we were focused in this case on the digital and creative space in London. So we gathered at a place called The Hub in Westminster, and we had about 60 digital and creative marketing entrepreneurs represented with their own businesses. And then we had a number of large businesses, Ogilvy, the ad people, IBM, Odeon Cinemas, Santander, Goldman Sachs, people who these small businesses are lusting to get into. And we had the procurement purchaser. We had the heads of procurement there. And so it was a bit of a debate on the part of the big companies explaining what you have to do to get in. What are the tricks? What are the things we look for? But also a debate amongst the smaller business as to the frustrations that they have and why they don't bother, and why they're being held out. And I don't want to suggest we've found a solution to this, because we haven't, but what we realized is there is a real willingness on the part of bigger companies and central government and departments of the GLA and others to do that with a little bit of help. And so we're going to sort of take this show around the road, and we're going to do, with the support of Santander and Goldman Sachs, do a whole series of events like this around the country, focusing on regions and focusing on particular sectors, and saying, how can you create a dialogue that unblocks some of those unintended blockages?
I suspect that there's people out there lusting after HSBC. Are you able to give any insight as the representative of the biggest organisation in the room by a country mile?
It's quite interesting. I have two customers that we are putting to have won contracts with us. So they had a product. There's one particular that we didn't have. It was one of my guys said, you know, we should be using this as a bank. It's an intelligence tool to help us work. Helps us actually know our customers better. You know, it's a search engine on It's surprising we didn't have it in the first place. Search engine that searches everything from cucumber to today to whatever on to find information about your customers. Not that I read cucumber today, actually, but so they won the contract, but I've got to say it took a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I asked them afterwards, what was your feeling as you're going along? And they did say, I don't know if we're a classic big business, but there was the layers to go through. But they got there because the idea was good enough, and it's something that we didn't have. Did the personal contact of myself and my colleagues in the bank help? I'm sure it did, but it was something we didn't have.
Yeah, so you weren't in control of it, though.
Yeah, no, we weren't actually in control of it, but the ending was incredibly positive. But the feedback was it took an awful long time, and it was quite frustrating for us in that sense because we wanted to be using it straight away.
I hesitate to say it's an amusing anecdote because it's hardly an anecdote and it certainly isn't amusing, but as a side issue of the great tax avoidance debate that's been raging in the country for the last, let's say 12 months, there were proposals which still haven't been buried to eliminate from government contracts any organisations that have indulged in what is regarded as unacceptable tax avoidance scheming. But there was a get-out. If the planning works, it's okay. It's only if the planning doesn't work that you're on the blacklist. So what you need to do is do unacceptable tax planning in a cunning way that works and not in a ham-fisted way that doesn't work. That's the message. Anyway, on that happy note, I hope Mervyn, if he had... Oh, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, I've waited a very long time to have an audience to vent my spleen about the procurement process that we have to go through for all sorts of things. And I'm sure all of you have come across similar things, but whether it's valuation services, our auction services, or property management, the sorts of nonsense that we have to go through, a pre-qualification questionnaire, then a tender process, then a pre-interview, then an interview, and then an interview on the contract. I mean, it's just getting completely bonkers. And it might not just be for government work. We tendered for a lot of work, and I've got a couple of examples. Most recently, we were asked to tender for a charity's, to manage a charity's portfolio. And the rent roll was about 400,000. There were about 40 or 50 odd properties. It was in a very nice area. And we had previously tendered for that work in 2007, and we lost because we were the most expensive. And we thought, great, because we're the most expensive. We don't want to win on price. And we were upset at the time that we lost, but we were pleased that we didn't win it on price. They came back, and on the 27th of July, they asked for another tender process because they hated the people that they employed on price.
Because they were too cheap.
Because they were too cheap, and service went down, which is one of the problems I want to talk about. And on the 27th of July, they asked for tenders in on the 6th of August. Okay? Now, it was fortunate because I could cut and paste from my previous tender, and I'm very pleased to say that we won the work. So apart from me wanting to moan about it, there is hope out there. If you do tender, you might lose, but you get the opportunity to play. And if you get the opportunity to play, human nature is as it is, and when they come to retender, they'll just go to the list they went to before, and you're on the list. So at least you get to play the game. We were asked to tender for the management of Bart's portfolio. And this is public record, so I can say it was Bart's. We're very pleased to win it. Every national firm of chartered surveyors was on the panel. And again, the mad thing about the procurement process is they ask 10, 15, 20 parties to tender, which is wasting the client's time and, of course, every professional time or every business time in putting forward to this thing and wasting all of that time. As it happens, it wasn't a waste of time. I'm very pleased that we tendered. We got in front of the panel. And when you get in front of a tender panel, you can then differentiate yourself. And this is the key. Unfortunately, you usually have to slice your throat on price to get in front of them in the first place. But I'll give you an example. there was a number of development sites that were coming back to the charity over a short period of time. We took one of those development sites, we worked with an architect that we worked with, and we developed a scheme. We did a drawing, we worked out how many flats we could get on it, and offices and so forth, what the residual value was, and we said, listen, if you manage this, this is the sort of creative service that you'll get, and this is what this is worth. And because we were able to take something and make something creative and differentiate ourselves, we got the job. And I suppose, whilst I want to moan about the tendering process that we all have to go through, the light at the end of the tunnel is that if you can get in front of your client, you can actually make a difference. So some moans and some positives.
Don't know why you're moaning. Sounds like you're doing very well out of it. Right, Mike, I hope you won't think me rude if I skip on and give you first bite of the next cherry.